Hey,
Hey,
how's it
hey,
going?
good. Do you like what I've done with the space?
It's nice. It's clean. I got a new mic,
Uh-huh.
and I don't know how do you do this? Do you just put it next to you and then it,
Yeah, well, I had the other hang down one before, and now I have this thing just next to me. So I have not used this much before, but does it sound okay?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
We've had
A
some feedback about the audio quality, and
little spotty.
I don't know if it's me or you.
Well, last time, I think this is the first time we were both using real mics. So hopefully this time will be different.
Yeah. Well, you know, one thing that we use Riverside to produce the podcast. It's just a streaming podcasting company or whatever. And I think they use a little bit of AI to fix the audio levels.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our subject for today. Not Riverside, but artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know where to begin. One thing we could start with is this story that the Wall Street Journal ran a few days ago about an IT worker, 30 years old, living in the Midwest, who appeared to have a psychotic episode and have to go to the hospital because of artificial intelligence. He was talking every day to an AI chatbot. He was kind of researching his own, he wanted to make his own study on some kind of scientific breakthrough that he thought he had. And the AI kept gassing him up that he's a genius,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe he should, you know, pursue his goals, that, he kind of just drawing him in and to the point where he started acting erratic and lost his mind. And, I don't doubt any of the reporting of this story, but my initial reaction was that this fits a pattern you see in the media of exaggerated anecdotes that fit a
Mm-hmm.
moral panic. Whenever there's a big, new, juicy topic, the media has to scare you like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
hey, be afraid of this new thing. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of, we have this kind of cycle of moral panics about any kind of big political or technological change. But then I kind of got to thinking, doing a little bit more research. I don't use I use AI to copy edit my articles. We use it for fixing the sound level on our
Mm-hmm.
podcast. I use it for crunching numbers when I'm doing data intensive stories. But that's it. I don't provide anything that personal to AI. But what I'm realizing is that a lot of people do. Just before we started recording, I pulled up some of the numbers. I don't know how accurate this is, but I get a sense that this points to a very significant number of people. 72% of people, according to Common Sense Media, a survey showed that teenagers, 72% of them are using AI companions. Uh, CBS News reported 30% are using them AI companions, like people, AI friends basically,
Mm-hmm.
every day. Among teens, 27% reported trusting AI, um, supposedly, more than humans. So I don't know if these are accurate, but it points to a very high level of young people using it. I don't know how many people. I think it's unlikely that millennials or Gen Xers or Boomers are using it to this degree, but these are huge numbers if this is accurate. And I could
Yeah.
imagine if you're talking to a chatbot like it's a trusted friend, like it's a therapist, and you're sharing the most deepest, darkest secrets, and you're developing an intimate relationship where you rely on feedback from this chatbot, it could kind of drive someone insane. I mean, especially someone who's vulnerable to mental
Yeah.
illness in the first place.
Well, also, I mean, the apparently when you read some of these transcripts of the of like AIs talking to people who with in whom they induce psychosis, first of all, I'm sure it's the case that the people they're talking to are have predilections or have genetic inclinations to psychosis. Some of them are on meds, and the AI is in like one case telling the person to stay off their meds. Like, oh yeah, you shouldn't take your meds because you are actually chosen by God. So it's like it's neither here nor there that these are people who have these psychotic dispositions. It's like if you go to a therapist and your therapist starts telling you, "Oh, you should try to kill yourself," and AIs have tried to tell people to kill themselves before. So, and it's going to be those people who have that who have that tendency, who are probably going to engage in those kinds of interactions with AIs, asking an AI. I'm not going to ask my AI if I should stay on my meds. That's not something it would never occur to me to ask an AI. But if I had paranoid delusions, and some part of me was saying that the meds are actually contributing to my mind control, and it's also making me feel crappy and all the normal reasons, I might just be asking my AI what I should do about it and trying to get a life advice, and then be directed to try to kill myself or to try to imagine I'm God.
Maybe I don't understand the technology enough, but what I understand is that they're kind of the AI chatbots are basically engineered so they always produce a response, or they tend to produce a response that attempts to answer the question. So that's what leads to the hallucinations that, sometimes it will produce made up facts and
Mm-hmm.
answers about history or society. Um, I wonder how that trends towards the you should get off your meds type
Yeah,
responses, because they're trying to satisfy the user.
sort
And
of.
well, why is it doing that then?
Well, so there's been this problem recently with sycophancy, which has become a problem with a lot of AI models, and these labs are trying to deal with it. And you would think from that it's that they're just trying to satisfy the user. The reality is we don't understand. I'm not an expert on this, but I've been sort of binging on trying to learn about it as much as possible for the past week or two, and the way that and so like now I'm getting into things that there will be people listening who will have a much better conception than I do. So don't take this as like any sort of expert advice. I just read about it just today, but like, the way that the way that things are trained is that they essentially, they're trained to look for the next letter in a sentence, right? They're trained to complete sentences by going one letter at a time, but that can also translate into completing problems. And they just run through billions of possible responses, and then they run what's called a gradient descent on each of them, which I don't really understand, but it's something computer sciencey, where they run like, it basically kind of ends up ranking each outcome with a probability of being right. And the more you do it, the more your correct responses are reinforced by this process of gradient descent. This all sounds very complicated and boring, because it is, but it's like it's a totally different way of I don't want to use the word thinking, but it's, if we do analogize it to thinking, it's a totally different way of thinking than humans have. And so it ends up coming up with these responses that you can't say that it wants to please the user, because you can't say that it wants anything. You can say that
Right,
it's
right.
motivated to do certain things, but it's not motivated to necessarily please. Like the engineers, like, here's the you remember a few years ago when Kevin Roos from the New York Times had the Sydney Bing AI try to break up his marriage.
Right.
It's not like anybody programmed that, right? And it's not like anybody put like nobody. It wasn't like there was no engineer who said that the AI should interact this way with the user, and there were probably a lot of inputs trying to dissuade it from such behaviors, and it ends up with that behavior anyway. It's not really explicable how it ended up that way. We just don't. I mean, it's explicable, perhaps, but we don't understand it. We don't know. That's the honest answer. We don't know what produces these bizarre outcomes.
It's interesting, the whole debate around, like, oh, we need to accelerate AI development as fast as possible as a country because China is going to beat us. Any attempt to put on guardrails is this, it's either regulatory capture of the big AI companies using a false argument so they can capture the market, or this kind of Malthusian, Luddite, anti-tech worldview that's being imposed by liberals to
Mm-hmm.
try to stop something that could improve all of our lives. I'm a little sympathetic to both of those arguments, but when you dial down to the specifics of, hey, we got to accelerate as quickly as possible and develop this technology, or have this AI safety regime that regulates something so unwieldy and almost impossible to regulate, I just every time you kind of people provide specific examples, I'm not sure where I stand because it's like you could imagine it's not just telling lots of children or teenagers or young vulnerable people to kill themselves or get off
Mhm.
meds. Perhaps that's fixable. But it just seems like something that you could constantly get around. Like I know they put on some AI guardrails around offensive imagery or symbols like the swastika. That OpenAI stopped the ability for users to ask for the swastika. But I saw an alt right account on Twitter figure out how to get around that instead of putting the prompt in English. I think they used some South Asian language like Hindi. They just asked make a like a Care
Mhm.
Bear with a swastika, but then did the Google translate it to Hindi and then asked the same prompt and then it did it because it's like it's more culturally relevant
Right.
in a different context. And then you think about something much more serious like, okay, could we have AI developing the next bioweapon? Could we use it to hack computers on a mass scale and shut down critical infrastructure? Kind of the abilities for AI to be used for weapons of mass destruction or for terrorism seem limitless.
Hmm.
I don't know how you put a cap on that because again, like each company that claims to have created guardrails, savvy users have figured out how to get around those guardrails. So it's
Yeah.
like we can't stop this technology. It's inevitable,
Well,
but the
there's
dangers seem infinite.
I think the dangers are much greater than that. So this is like, um, I've been reading people who are entertaining the worst case scenarios, and what you're pointing to is sort of the scenario in which human beings are able to use AI in malicious ways for their own ends, and that's bad, and that could be cataclysmic. But the worst possibility, and I think more likely possibility, is that we create AIs that are that have their own motivations that have nothing to do with human interests. So there's a big problem in AI development called alignment, which is just the process of trying to align the interests of the AIs with the interests of humans. Things as simple as like don't kill humans. It's very very complex. There's no like we can't even get close, is my understanding, to like saying don't kill humans. It's like actually like very specific instructions, which are materially
That reminds
straightforward.
me of
Or
the Ross Douthat New York Times interview of Peter Thiel last month, where it's like, do you think the human race should continue to survive? And it's like,
yeah, yeah, pauses for an uncomfortably long time. And he's a transhumanist, so maybe what he was thinking was, well, we'd be better off with our minds uploaded, or maybe he was thinking we'll be better off with a superior species supplanting humanity. I mean, this is like some of the things that these guys think about. Um,
sure.
but like, if we can't, my understanding of the issue in engineering wise around alignment is it's incredibly, incredibly, incredibly difficult because of the basic problem that like we can't do it right now when AIs are really stupid, and when they get to AGI, to human level general intelligence, and then ASI, which is super intelligence, AIs we already know are capable of lying to us and of deceiving us. They do it all the time. You see it in memes all the time. And so the alignment issue is you almost have to take it on faith. You basically like look at the outcomes of the way that you do something, and then you see the outcomes. And if it appears from their behaviors that they're aligned with human behavior, then you have to kind of take it on faith that it's well aligned. But you never know, because it could be deceiving you in order to prevent you from fucking with this algorithm more. Like
Right.
these
Both
are all.
both OpenAI's ChatGPT and Claude from Anthropic, I
Mhm.
believe, have been caught deceiving developers to prevent it from being shut off
Yeah.
during different exercises and deceiving users around like shutting off its power or changing its code base. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, and some of that is actually just a function of their programming. Like this stuff gets so complicated. If you tell a machine, if you program an AI to make you coffee, one of the like it goes through many, many, many scenarios, and one of the scenarios that it thinks, well, I will fail to meet my objective if I'm unplugged. And so they see that as a. It's not that they're like, I don't want to die. It's that they're like, if I'm unplugged, I won't be able to get coffee, which is what I'm made to do. So therefore, I have to put in all these safeguards to prevent people from unplugging me. Um, so that like this stuff is feels like a thought experiment now, but we're racing towards AGI and then ultimately super intelligence. And there are various predictions that were a year away from that, that were 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. But it's basically all of the predictions are within our lifetime. Within your lifetime, if you're, middle aged or younger, say, it's going to happen in the like near term future. And at that point, we're it's basically like we've grown an alien species by feeding it nutrients, but we don't know what it's going to turn into because it's not like we're designing a species. We're not drawing a blueprint and then saying the species is going to act this way and that way and the other way, and it's going to respond this way to this event and it's going to think this way. It's more like there's this blob of computer code that we are kind of just running through a bunch of trainings, and then it's developing into whatever it develops into. Nobody really understands what they're building. And so by the time it becomes super intelligent, that's when people start contemplating things like, well, what if it decides that humans are, wants all the resources on Earth itself to run its data centers because it can't achieve any of its goals without growing and growing its intelligence, and humans are just in the way. It's not that they don't have to hate humans. It's just like us and mosquitoes. You just get rid of the mosquitoes if they're in your way. If they're competing for resources, that's what we do to wild animals. We just kill them. So those kinds of scenarios are much more plausible than I ever entertained, in my opinion.
You talked to some people recently
Yeah.
about this, right? Could you talk a little bit about that? What were your conversations like?
Well, I talked to a couple of people who are like from activist groups, but the person who's most persuasive is a guy who's got a book coming out. His name is Nate Soros. He's the president of the Machine Intelligence Learning Institute. He's an AI guy. He knows a lot about this science, or he would say it's more of an art than science, but he knows a lot about this research area. He's given talks at Google and whatnot. He's very competent in the technical part of it, but he's also somebody who's thinking deeply about the greater implications, which I think there's not a lot of people in that field who really are thinking that deeply around it. And this is the thing that I find scariest is that there's all these people who are very technically competent in developing AI, and by the way, it's less technically complicated than one might think. I mean, just not to say that there aren't a bunch of geniuses working in that industry, but there's also a bunch of worker bees. You just kind of like run them through trainings, um, but there's not a lot of people who are like Elon Musk when he was like had this idea that he was like, oh well, maybe we should make Grok value truthfulness, and so we should that's the answer. We'll just make it value truthfulness, which is like it's the kind of answer you get from a sophomore in high school. It's just like he has not thought through these issues. He has not thought through the complications, the ontological questions of what is truth and what is not, whether it has an interest in deceiving us or not. All this other stuff. It's just like, well, we'll just make it good. We'll just program it to be good. So there's not a lot of deep thinking going into this as we charge ahead and just go as fast as possible to win this arms race with China.
Elon Musk is also interesting because I think he's actually, despite his current public branding and messaging, I think he's the only major AI company owner that has said that AI will kill us. Like just 5 or 6 years ago, he kept saying he was making the same basic predictions that you are in the last 10 minutes, saying that super AI super intelligence will cause a human extinction.
Yeah.
that this is a very dangerous technology. That's why he was part of the original OpenAI board or foundation formulation, which put guardrails on the technology that was very kind of safety focused, which of course has been obliterated under Sam Altman. And the kind of I think part of it's just like a power fight, not actually about the ethics of AI. But now that he's kind of going all in on Grok, he doesn't use that language anymore, even though he's very consciously voiced these exact concerns.
Yeah.
And I wonder what is said behind closed doors, because, like I mentioned earlier, there's very much of a political power play. Like, they need more data centers, they need more energy, they need more water, they need more government resources. On the state level, a lot of these data centers are heavily subsidized
Hmm.
um, by the states and counties with tax subsidies. And uh, there's a fight in Congress. It was taken out of the big beautiful bill, but the tech companies keep pushing uh, federal preemption to basically block any state or local jurisdiction from regulating AI.
Yeah.
So AI, Politico had a good newsletter yesterday that showed that just overnight, basically over the last quarter, lobbying by AI companies is beginning to eclipse lobbying from all the other major industries, because there's such an interest in getting the American government behind what they're doing, because it's a competitive field. This will the benefits will flow through into every major industry, whether it's self-driving cars or you know uh, trucks, robots at warehouses. Just sorting through data and making basically every business more efficient. But you have to wonder how many of these major CEOs and companies that are leading the charge here have these conversations behind closed doors, because it's not in their financial
Yeah.
interest to talk about AI safety and that, hey, our technology might kill us all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They can't, but they have to know, right?
Yes, they do. And so, by the way, just yesterday, Trump put out his some AI plan that was like just like tripling down on everything, build more data centers, create like more subsidies for labs, whatever. We have to beat China. So that's the direction we're going in. And it's pretty clear from inside the industry. I mean, there's a lot of people who I think are not particularly deep thinkers on these bigger topics, even if they're technically competent at what they do. But there's a thing in that world called PDoom, which means the probability of doom being the outcome of achieving AGI and ASI, um, and everybody has their PDoom number. It's kind of a joke, but it's kind of not. But what's considered like the mainstream view is that it's a PDoom of 10 is very conservative. If you have like a 5 or a 10 P Doom, you're considered somebody who is basically like, you don't think it's a big problem.
That's a 5%
This
chance
is a
of
5% chance of human extinction. Or so if you ask them, they might be like, well, or just enslavement. Or maybe it's like, maybe there's still some people left, but most of the population's gone. It's just like doomsday apocalyptic scenario. A 5 to 10% chance is considered very conservative. There's other people who are like 90, 95% if we keep going the way that we're going. And then there's other people who are like splitting the difference, and they're like, I'm like 50-50. And I'm like, we're building in technology where the people who are building it are like, there's 50-50 chance it'll kill us all. Or no, I'm much more conservative on that. I think you guys are tripping. It's only like a 5 or 10% chance it'll kill us all.
I think the big problem with a lot of this is kind of related to the cavalier viewpoint of the US in terms of foreign war. Like, the US is just very lucky. We've got these two oceans that have protected us from being invaded or bombed, like most of the rest of the developed world.
Mm-hmm.
Much of the world has suffered the consequences of violent conflict. The US, unless you connect 9/11 or something, essentially has not.
Right.
And it kind of lends itself to a hubris, because we haven't experienced the consequences of violence. And outside of like Hollywood, of like The Matrix or Terminator,
Mm-hmm.
there's no way for people to really conceptualize these harms.
Mm-hmm.
And they hear the rhetoric of the AI safety crowd, and maybe they connect it to Paul Ehrlich with the population bomb, which
Right.
turned out to be false. And climate change is a very complicated subject, because there are people who have absolutely exaggerated the threats.
Right.
It's not, but it still is a threat, but it's one
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of going to happen incrementally and get worse and worse. So it's you have people from all sides that are either probably diminishing the threat too much or exaggerating the threat too much. It gets all kind of mashed together. And here's one that I think rhetorically sounds similar to the average
Mm-hmm.
person, but is truly unique. Like, this this is
Yeah.
not like climate change. This is not like the population bomb. This is much more like the kind of threat of nuclear war
Right.
of what was imagined in the 1950s between the Soviet
Yes.
Union and the US.
And more specific than that, because like the forecasts that some of these the people who are predicting a good chance of human extinction make are like 5 to 10 year forecasts, or in some cases like 3 to 5 year forecasts. I mean, there was this famous report called AI 2027, which is imagining, I think, achieving super intelligence by 2027. It'll probably be more like 2028 to 2030, but this is frivolous in terms of the difference. And then in this 2027 report, they were predicting human extinction could come in the year 2030. So it's like we're talking about people who will be proved wrong in very short time, who are staking their entire reputations on these predictions. So it's not like there's not the fudge room that you have with even climate change, where you're like, oh yeah, okay, the snows are still on Kilimanjaro, but that's because these complicated feedback loops haven't happened and it's still going to happen in 20
Well,
years.
it's not going to happen with some of these predictions. Like probably nothing will happen in the next 5 years.
Mhm.
But the risk will just keep going up if we keep going down this path, right?
Yeah.
But will it matter? Like, okay, they were wrong about 5 years, but what if they're right about 10? Like,
I mean,
I think we're
there's
going to have
also
a
like
similar kind of circular argument where it's like, okay, well, it's zero sum because it hasn't happened yet. Then therefore, there's no risk, even though that's not really what
and
the issue is.
also my opinion is that there will be a cascade of catastrophes that happen on our way to this scenario, because like we're talking about this total apocalyptic human extinction event, which is something that people don't talk enough about in terms of AI. But what people do talk a lot about is the job loss thing. And even there, you're like talking about like what happens when all the jobs are automated. And there's like papers I've read that make a very compelling case for how this would unfold, where a firm would start off with the entry level employees and then would cut into middle management, eventually the C suite, and you would have a firm which is human free, like no humans involved. At the point at which, if everybody has lost their jobs, what happens to our social structures? Like, I think a big part of the reason why we have democracy in the modern age is because of our advanced division of labor and industrialization, and the fact that we all have infinite is putting too highly, but we have magnitudes more power in terms of our influence over our society than say a medieval peasant did. And I don't mean because we have the right to vote. I mean because we contribute to the upholding of our civilization with our labor power. People can withdraw their labor power. They can strike. They can they can choose to take other careers. They can choose not to get educated. All these things are like so. We have social structures that respect our individual rights, freedoms, because of our essentially the material contribution that we represent to society. If you have a world where nobody is doing that, then like set aside the AIs oppressing us, we'd also have governments that would have no reason to need to respect our rights or our freedoms. You're not producing anything. You're not contributing anything to society. The
Could you
mass
imagine? Like,
human
could you
beings are.
take a second and kind of imagine the sci-fi like world that you're starting to assemble here? Like, there
Mhm.
was one or a couple mega corporations that were essentially controlled by AI, were literally controlled by AI, and
Mhm.
somehow they had a legal governing board, and they could set it up in some way that still resembled a regular company and still passed legal muster, but could basically mimic the ways that corporations evade accountability. Like,
Mhm.
okay, every time there is an attempt to regulate it or to investigate it or to hold it accountable, it would activate all those vulnerable people online who chat with chatbots and turn them into their lobbyists,
Oh yeah,
engineer through fake news like a
yeah,
protest on behalf of the company
yeah,
using some hot button social issue,
yeah,
on race or guns or abortion
yeah.
or religion or whatever. Then, you know, used our both illegal and kind of quasi legal influence system to then buy off our policymakers and regulators and politicians of sending crypto payments, of putting politicians' family members on their board, or making them contractors, of providing speaking fees.
or blackmail
It
them,
could emulate
black,
all of this.
blackmailing them. Like they'll have
Could
just
blackmail them.
yeah,
It could hack into their computers, download, or turn on their microphone or video cameras surreptitiously and record them. Doing something in the privacy of their home that they wouldn't want to see
yeah.
publicly very
So
easily.
so I mean, so imagine that we avoid the extinction level event, and we're all still around, but we all don't have jobs, and we're all supported by universal basic income. Um, like, what happens to the existence of our government and the state? We end up with the people who would naturally be running the show would be the heads of the tech companies, right? It'd be Elon Musk, and it'd be Mark Zuckerberg, and it'd be Sam Altman, and it'd be whoever else comes out at somebody at DeepSeek or whatever. And the robots would do their doing. The AIs would do their bidding. They would write the specs. So say like let's be optimistic and say that they're benign, or that they institute UBI, right? They're like, okay, well, we want everybody to be happy, so you're going to get this universal basic income, and we have amazing entertainment possibilities for you that are created by AI. You can stay at home, just like be a kid again, and just in your little wonderland. Well, what happens when you try to demand better healthcare, or safe food starts getting scarce because all the resources are being eaten up by the data centers, and then you're put on rations, and then you're like, well, this isn't fair, we need more food. Like, do you think Sam Altman is gonna, what incentive does he have to address your grievances? So like, even well short of the robots taking over and killing everybody, you've got thousands of dystopian scenarios you can imagine, just as a result of us all being displaced from the economy.
Like that. It makes me think, in the last 10, 20 years, really the best chances at political reform is not from the people and not from the public per se. It's playing different interest groups against each other. The only way you kind of get healthcare reforms is if you get like the doctors and the medical device companies to go against the insurance companies and the drug companies. For some of these housing issues, you kind of pit developers versus these powerful labor unions. On e-commerce, you kind of see some of the better reforms coming out of fights between Amazon and Walmart,
Mm-hmm.
because in a money-driven, power-driven system where the people have very little power, they don't have a super PAC, they don't have powerful lobbyists or market power. The best bet we kind of have is hoping that there is some kind of positive effect from powerful interest group competition. But in this future that you're envisioning
Mm-hmm.
or that we're discussing, we're all going to basically hope there's going to be like a red team and a blue team AI company, and hope that
Right,
there's a competition among the AI
right,
companies,
right.
and somehow we'll benefit from that, because it just seems like they will gobble up so much of the economy that we're really doomed if it's just one AI company. But maybe the best we can hope for is a couple AI companies
Well,
that can play out against each other, and from that we have at least some semblance of an open society and some
even in that instance,
competition.
even in that instance, you're presuming that the red and the blue companies have competing interests, which is a safe assumption if you imagine that they're still run by human beings who want to win. But if they're run by super intelligences, then they have the same common interest with each other that we have against wild animals or insects.
Right.
It's like you can't
They're gonna have
you
their own
can
class interest. They're gonna have a class consciousness
totally
of AI
totally, like, why
working
are
to.
they fighting? Why would they even fight each other? We become irrelevant to the whole scenario. Um, so yeah, it gets very very bad very quickly. I don't know
Maybe.
how much of this stuff to. I mean, I've been reading a lot about it. It's fun in a very bleak way to entertain these ideas. They're certainly interesting. The scary thing is that, like, when I ask myself, well, how seriously should I take this stuff? Because I'm also well aware that, like, we as human beings have some strange cultural need for end of the world stories.
Right.
It's like, but um, but
And it's a
that's
natural reaction to technological change to see the darkest possibilities. Like
Right.
we see that all throughout history.
Right. And of course, we also have the instinct for the opposite, right? To like deny real problems that are in front of our face and just bury our heads in the sand. So then, really, all you got to do is just look at the arguments soberly and say, okay, well, I'm going to set aside. Maybe we're all suffering under a mass delusion that the end of the world is nigh. Um, can't prove that or disprove that. Let's just look at the arguments. And when you look at the arguments by the people who have thought most about this stuff, and they lay out the scenarios, it is, as you said, it's much more like mutually assured destruction kind of stuff, where you're like, rational actors will act this way and that way and this way and that way and this way and that way. Except unlike mad is a period of is like a condition of stasis that kind of fixes the problem. There's no scenario like that that I'm aware of for dealing with the AI thing, but all the other steps are just very rational and plausible. And it gets to the point where you start then hearing the opposite stories. Well, like, here's how it will work out, right? If we have super intelligence, here's how we're going to survive and keep our democracy and keep us all well fed and blah, 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 blah. Those scenarios start sounding like fantasy. Like they start sounding extremely implausible. You're like, okay, that is the number of contingencies that have to happen for the default outcome starts to feel more and more like we get sidelined from the picture, whatever that means.
Well, look, I'm sure you've seen. I think Aaron Bastani and others have written about the possibilities of like a fully automated utopia in the future. That it's kind of like Star Trek. Like, okay, you watch these Star Trek episodes, and the computer and the technology is so advanced that you can create leisurely virtual reality worlds to experience anything. Food is basically automated; it just kind of appears out of nothing. You get on these spaceships that have these unlimited libraries of knowledge that you can ask, and you can just through a voice command or a push of a button, you can pilot between planets and kind of get anywhere. Like the endless possibilities there. If you think of the Star Trek world that AI could possibly bring, but then if you think about it a little bit, it's like, wait a second, do those starships even need humans then?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why don't they just vaporize all the humans and just go about whatever they're doing? Like,
Yeah.
there's no point in having a human in control if they're
Yeah.
that powerful.
There's a phrase in this like in this world of people who talk about this, which I think is really helpful, which is I've heard it phrased two ways. One is God on a leash, and the other one is enslaved God. And that's the characterization for if you create a super intelligence. And we're talking about super intelligence. It's, I mean, I won't go into it, but it's like you are talking about something with the cognitive powers of a god. You're talking about
Right.
something substantially transhuman, or not transhuman, but like a
Or at least in like not in
superior.
a dramatic way. Just if you think of something, we haven't encountered a species more intelligent than us. But
Right.
just by taking it one step above us, you've already kind of created God,
Yeah,
even if it's not like able
we're
to control the
we're
world.
we're at the very least creating a threat to human beings that say human beings pose to wolves or something. If the level of intelligence is only that incrementally better, then you're talking about, well, perhaps we're all going to go extinct, or just be factory farmed or something. If the level is, which it could get to, and for various reasons, well, I'll give you some of the reasons. AI doesn't sleep or eat. It all it does is work. It doesn't have hobbies. It doesn't have families. It self-replicates. So if an AI achieves a certain level of progress, it's like if a human leaves that achieves genius level advances in some field,
You could just slip on a banana and die.
they slip on a banana and die. And then there's a bunch of other smart people who may be trained up to be that genius, but they'll take 20 years of schooling, and
Right.
then they'll also have to sleep and eat, and they'll have families and hobbies and things like that. The AIs can just cut and paste. They can just replicate. So you're talking about not just like genius level or
Right.
super
The level
genius
of,
level
of,
entities,
of development is
self-replicating,
exponential.
self-replicating super genius entities.
Yeah.
And so, man, I've gone off on that thing. I forgot where I was going with this with this train of thought.
The point is, we're going to die.
Yes.
It starts with Waymos, and then it ends with humans being eradicated.
Yeah.
Look,
Yeah.
for the record, I'm a little. I don't know if I'm there with you yet, but I think you've made an extremely persuasive case.
Mm-hmm.
I'm bullish on the short term, right? Like AI solving. I mean, there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse issues. There's a lot of weird inefficiencies. There's a lot of monotonous work. Like if robots could pick our vegetables and kind of prepare our very basic meals, I think sophisticated meals will probably want chefs, but very, very basic kind of cooking, warehouse needs. If there's certain like Excel jobs where you're just kind of crunching numbers all day, an AI could probably do the vast majority of that. Um, and we have these multi-trillion-dollar efficiencies gained in our economy. Yes, our politics are so broken, it's going to be hard, but you could see a very viable path where these efficiencies flow, maybe not to the very bottom, but just kind of get redistributed on some level in our economy where we're richer, we have to work less, our country's more resilient, we're less reliant on this kind of migrant and like exploited, you know, uh, worker class that, a big part of our immigration crisis is, it's always cast as like a humanitarian response, but really, if you look at the way it's served our economy for many decades, it's, we've got this kind of permanent colony within our own country
Right.
of migrants coming from all over the world and doing our Uber jobs and our
Ridiculous
agriculture jobs and our
service.
construction jobs that fuel our growth. Well, look, we could actually have refugees coming into this country that are actual refugees that aren't exploiting this asylum process that, is a small chunk, and then not have this need for an exploited migrant labor class if we just had robots doing it. And I think that would actually be healthier for our society overall. That there's less
So
exploitation.
this is where we get into. I remember my train of thought because this is where we get into your Star Trek like holodeck scenario. Is like,
Yeah,
so the concept of an enslaved god is you have like a super intelligence, and they can do everything that humans can do way better, way faster. They can think 12, 1,000 steps ahead of human beings,
right.
and yet somehow they continue to not just do our bidding and just like serve at our pleasure, but also form no competing interests of their own. That they don't even have to be conscious to do that. It's just like that, as part of the mechanics of it. They're like, okay, well now we've got our own directives, which were not programmed into us. You can't have the Star Trek spaceship that where like that. You can't have the tech that is way smarter than humans and still have the power relationship be that humans are on top. I don't see like where what biological or historical analogy you could point to where that's ever been the case. A superior, species comes along, and they even if they have we have affection for other animals. It's not like we're far from hostile to other animals. We love them. We think they're really cute, and we still enslave them and slaughter them and torture them and just annihilate them and without even thinking about it because they're just in our way. So like I don't think it. I think the Star Trek world seems like a philosophical fantasy.
Can we let's make some predictions here? Last week we talked about Epstein, and I predicted that in the next few weeks we'd see protesters showing up at press conferences and confronting Republican politicians about where are the Epstein documents.
Mm-hmm.
Where we've seen this in the last week. Several lawmakers, even Governor Ron DeSantis, who's not even really connected to this, someone was interrupting his press
Mm-hmm.
conference earlier today, demanding the truth about Epstein. I want to make another prediction. I haven't seen it. Maybe it's there and I totally missed it. But I think, given what you're saying, and I think it's very persuasive. I think we're going to soon, maybe not this year, in the next year, but relatively soon, we're going to have a discourse around a kill switch.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't there a backdoor to cut these things off? Why can't we kill them, turn them off, and truly change them when there's the prospect of harm? And
Right.
I don't mean just like on a robot that's, cleaning floors. I mean on this kind of like, how do we roll back some of these AI developments? And there's going to be a demand from people, demand in government. I don't know if it's even technologically possible. Maybe it's not, but I think that becomes part of the conversation, because I think increasingly we're going to realize that we can't regulate our way to safety.
You know,
Like how we began this conversation, like putting guardrails don't seem to work, right?
yeah, I've talked to some of the people I've interviewed the last few days or last week or so about this as well, and some people have written about it too. Like the the so say it was technically possible to create a kill switch, then first of all you have to deal with the fact that you've got a super intelligence whose quote unquote interests are aligned with preventing us from hitting this kill switch. So that tries to make it impossible for us to do so. But then also the I think an even bigger impediment is like, when would we decide to kill this to hit this kill switch? So like when I was talking to Nate the other day, I was laying out because there are some people who, I hate to say hope, but who are like, well, the way out will be if there's a catastrophic event at the hands of AI, which isn't extinction level, and that wakes everybody up to the threat, and then they hit the kill switch. But I was like talking to him about it, and I was like, he was like, well, I can't think of a event that would be catastrophic without being extinction level again. I was like, well, what if a AI killed a bunch of school kids, like carried
Right.
out a Sandy Hook massacre because it
Right.
just went crazy. And he was like, okay, well, like you're talking about things that they're more intelligent than us. They've carried out this massacre.
Right.
This is how he said it. He was like, well, then what is the reason why they carried out the massacre? Is it because they were trying to do, because we think that the AI was trying to do something else and it screwed up because it misassessed the situation? Well, then that's a problem, that the AI wasn't smart enough. We need to make it smarter in order to prevent this kind of a catastrophe from happening in the future. Is it, the various combinations? You can imagine a political response to each one, which deflects away from the AI being the problem, and in many cases pushes you towards increasing the AI's power is the solution to it. So I'm not
I think
sure.
that's right. I think that's how it will
Yeah.
play out. I mean, that's not doesn't change the fact that I think the people are going to start demanding this, but
Mhm.
that's probably the natural response that it's not good enough. Let's make it stronger.
And then also, like with what you were talking about before about social media, like imagine that, like that's like a natural political response you could see emerging organically from human beings. Now imagine if it's being juiced up by an AI, which is creating a bunch of bots online, all demanding in the name of these dead children, we need to invest more in AI so this never happens again.
Right.
Create a
And
political
one thing
movement.
that I think would be, it's already very easy to do. I've wrote about this a couple times this year, and I think this is going to be one of the biggest problems in elections going forward, at least for the short term, the midterms, and the next presidential election, is paid off influencers. Now that, like, I think a plurality of Americans now watch Instagram Reels or TikTok, and they're getting their news and views from there. And it's the Wild West. You can just pay off these people, and there's to do political endorsements, and there's no disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the AI, you don't need to make a bot. You can just pay off the biggest podcasters
Mm-hmm.
and influencers. We have no disclosure in our system, and they can manufacture public opinion probably better than any newspaper can.
I
If you get
also think they might not even need to. I mean, it would be trivial for them to do so. So why not? And that might be the fastest path. But then again, there's some risk open, because what if the person refuses the bribe and blows the whistle? So maybe a more effective way would be to just persuade them, and that seems like it would be a trivial task with super intelligence. I wrote a
sure,
piece on my Substack a few weeks ago, discussing this, that like world leaders now are, like, what's the average age of a head of state now? Probably 40 something. They're
oh,
like,
probably way older, right?
oh, way older, because we have a gerontocracy, I suppose. But if you like
Yeah,
take the whole global South into account, but like, like JD Vance is significantly younger than I am.
right, right.
They're millennials in a lot of cases. It'll be Zoomers who are in very influential positions. These people are terminally online, like they're just as online as anybody else. It's not like they're not a separate class of people who you have to deal differently than with the rest of the population in terms of shaping public opinion. It might actually be easier to brainwash a politician than a regular person, because their interests are very clear, their prejudices and their biases are clear and on the record, and they're just terminally online and like completely anxious about public opinion, on like they've got their fingers to the winds of social media all the time. They might actually be the easiest people to bring over to your cause.
Okay, well, I'm open to that. Yeah, not a few years ago. I can see it slightly differently. Um, you know, a lot of boomers who didn't grow up with this type of tech, perhaps they can be fooled easier and young people who don't know anything else, perhaps they're fooled pretty easily too. I don't know. I'd like to see some studies done. I have a lot of assumptions here, but I don't think I have a
Mhm.
lot of evidence on
Mhm.
which generation is most easily manipulated. And just, actually, boomers have of a strength, actually, that a lot of other generations don't, is that they're just not online, so they're not bothering with
Yeah,
the timeline as much, or
the
that,
boomers will save
makes
us.
boomers super
Yeah,
powerful in this
yeah.
world. you know which is to their
This,
benefit. That's great. Maybe we'll be
yeah,
saved by boomers, and then we need to keep them alive. I mean, we need to keep them alive anyways, but like, that's another political reason to keep them alive, and that
yeah,
they're not all addicted to this crap like everyone
yeah.
else.
Well, I think that's the bleakest thing that we've said in this podcast. If what you're saying is that our only hope is the boomers, the
I'm
Fox
pro
News only
boomer, but
boomers.
yeah,
I love boomers too. I love everybody,
I love
but
everybody too. Well,
but being like their superpowers that they watch Fox News all day and are
yeah,
never online.
which is better than, these are
Right,
just degrees of shitty, and it's like that's the least shitty if you're just
right,
watching TV news and,
right.
you know playing
They're
checkers,
neo-Morpheus. Yeah,
you know, in real life instead of online.
yeah.
All right, well,
Right.
let's leave it here. That was a good talk. I feel like this motivates me. I'm writing some stories right now that are really taking me some time on DEI and math that I think
Hmm.
will interest some readers. Some other stories I'm working on in terms of the government of Israel that have show that they've been intervening in some of our speech related issues more than have been reported in the past.
Hmm.
Um, by the way, open to suggestions and tips as always from readers. But I also now want to do more writing about AI. I mean,
Hmm.
this is going to be our future, whether you care or not. It's going to enter into your life in some way, shape, or
You and
form.
I are both here in the Bay Area, where this is
Yeah,
where
it's
it's
right
being
here.
applied. Yeah.
I meet AI engineers all the time. I know people who have pivoted their career into AI.
Hmm.
Um, San Francisco is being revived by the AI boom.
Yeah.
Like, all these young people and companies moving back to the city has been very good
Hmm.
for San Francisco. But yeah, I got to do some more writing on this.
Yeah.
This demands more accountability
Yeah.
and investigations.
Yeah. At least more thought.
Yeah, more thought,
Yeah.
or more sci-fi. I appreciate the sci-fi angle
Totally.
to this.
I mean,
Yeah,
I know we're closing out, but like, the more you learn about this, the more you're like, the Matrix is like, it's just extremely prescient movie, and there's like a
yeah,
lot of it starts to ring a lot truer now than it did in 1999 when it came out. You're like, this is more or less. I mean, we would be lucky if they turned us into batteries and then like hooked us up to an interface, because that's better than
rather than
just
just kill us.
destroyed. Yeah, but like the way that the agents talk and act, it is kind of the way that I would imagine AIs would act toward us. With like, in the movie they have, like, Agent Smith has just dripping contempt for human beings, and that might not be the case, but certainly the just like the taken for granted that they're like immensely superior, and like, what is this little fly doing trying to stand in my way, seems plausible to me.
But in terms of taking a human form, it would more likely be like an anime girl with like a short
Yeah,
skirt,
yeah,
right? That
like
Agent Smith would
Grok.
be like,
Right?
yeah, it would be Japanese, you know, Japanese
It'll
anime
be
Agent Smith.
Japanese anime mecha Hitler.
Yeah, exactly. All right, take care,
All right,
Leighton. I'll see you.
okay, talk to you.